Welcome to the April 7th meeting of the Town Council, the Joint Town Council and Parking Authority. At this time, I'd like to advise the audience to please silence your cell phones or other communication devices. And clerk, will you please call the roll?
Thank you and good evening. Councilmember Diane McNutt.
Here.
Councilmember Barbara Spector.
Here.
Councilmember Joe Przynski.
Here.
Vice Mayor Marcia Jensen.
Here.
Mayor and Chair Steve Leonardis.
Here. At this time, I'd like to invite up Rebecca Armstrong to join us in leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance this evening. And I will tell you a few words about Rebecca when she arrives up at the dais here. Rebecca is a 7th grader at Fisher School, and she gets straight A's. She enjoys math and choir, her two favorite subjects. She helps with her kindergarten class, with the kindergartner class at her Sunday school. She plays competitive soccer with the Los Gatos United Soccer League in the U13, and she is also on the Fisher Middle School girls soccer team. She enjoys surfing, so do I, water skiing and snow skiing. She is the oldest of 4 sisters, which to me seems like the biggest accomplishment. And her youngest sister is 5 years old. Please join me in welcoming Rebecca Armstrong.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please give one more round of applause for Rebecca. At this time, I'd like to invite Mr. Kevin Dugan to join me at the podium. Kevin is the retired city manager of Mountain View. He is now the West Coast Regional Director of ICMA, and ICMA stands for the International City and County Management Association, and is here this evening to present an award to our town manager, Mr. Greg Larson. Welcome, Kevin.
Thank you very much, Mayor.
Get you.
Thank you, Mayor, and members of the Town Council. Appreciate your time this evening. Yes, it's my pleasure on behalf of ICMA, the International City County Management Association, to make a presentation to your town manager. It's a particular pleasure for me to do this because I spent a good bit of my career here in the West Valley at the city of Campbell, so it's always great to come back to this part of the valley. Also, Greg was a peer of mine when I was a city manager here in the county for quite a few years, so our paths have crossed again, which is really a delight for me. Just a little background, ICMA is the International Association, as you might guess from the title, of professional local government managers. We have 9,000 members in the United States and 24 countries around the world. In California, we have a state affiliate of ICMA called Cal ICMA. And the reason for this award this evening is Greg was the president of Cal ICMA and our 1,000 members here in California for 2013. It was really a pleasure. I serve as the staff for Cal ICMA, and it was a real pleasure to work with Greg in that capacity. He really provided outstanding leadership to our board of directors, and it's a group of about 25 or 30 members, so that's even more challenging than a town council to work with. And some of the major initiatives during his year related to professional development, promoting additional ethics training in the profession, and also preparing the next generation of professionals to local government management. So with that, I'd love Greg to come up, and fortunately it's a short plaque as far as wording, and I'd be happy to read it. Cal ICMA, the California Association of ICMA, with much thanks and appreciation to Greg Larson for your outstanding service and leadership as the president of Cal ICMA for 2013. Thank you very much, Greg. Thank you, Mayor.
All right, thank you for coming in, Mr. Dugan, and presenting that. So we have no closed session report this evening. At this time, I'd like to request that any members of the audience who want to speak on any item which is not on our agenda to fill out a speaker card. We're moving on to council and manager reports. Council matters. Does any member of council wish to share something? Mr. Brzezinski.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just report on a couple of meetings I attended since our last council meeting. On the 26th of March, I was at the Metropolitan Transportation Commission retreat in Sonoma that was doing the preliminary work in preparation for the next year's tasks for the MTC. And then on the 3rd of April, I was attendance at the Valley Transportation Authority Board of Directors.
Thank you. Councilmember Spector.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Over the past 2 weeks, the Plan Development Ad Hoc Committee meeting has occurred. We're going forward with the modification of the Plan Development proposal. And we also had a Policy Committee meeting, and many issues are being discussed, and they will be brought forward to the entire council, I would guess, within the next month or so.
Thank you. Vice Mayor.
To add to our many committee meetings, we also had our first meeting of the Housing Element Advisory Board, and we got some good information and some good participation and some new memberships, so that was a good meeting. I also attended the West Valley Mayor's meeting while our mayor was out of town, and the message from that meeting is the Santa Clara Valley Water District and the San Jose Water Company want you to know that even though it poured last week, we have a drought, and they are encouraging you very much to conserve water where you can, especially with your landscaping.
Thank you. Manager Matters.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, 3 quick items from staff. First, I'd like to introduce the mayor and council and public to the new assistant town manager and community development director, who will be starting with the town on May 5th. Ms. Laurel Prevetti is here in the audience. If you could stand, Laurel. So this is Laurel joining us. So welcome, Laurel. Laurel brings a distinguished career in Silicon Valley, coordinating complex land use planning and general plan issues with high regard for public and community engagement in dealing with complex policy issues. So we welcome her to the team over the next month. Second, the next meeting of the Housing Element Update Advisory Board will be this Thursday here in the council chambers. And of course, the public is welcome to all of those meetings. And last, we are now soliciting applicants for our youth serving positions on the Youth Commission, on the Parks Commission, and the Community and Senior Services Commission. So all junior high and high school students residing in Los Gatos who are interested in assisting the town are encouraged to apply through the town clerk's office by May 9th, and we will announce this again. Last, this is the beginning of Keep Los Gatos Beautiful Month, and we have a quick Did You Know from Shalane Hammock in Parks and Public Works. Shalane?
Did you know that April is Keep Los Gatos Beautiful Month? It focuses on the awareness of the beauty, environment, and sustainability of Los Gatos. We have a newsletter that is actually out in the front hall if anyone wants to get it, and it has information on environmental and sustainability events and information that's happening throughout the month of April. We have Keep Los Gatos Beautiful booths at Farmers Market with community organizations providing information about sustainability and environmental topics. And lastly, we have discounts available throughout the community with participating cafes for people who bring their own mugs during the month of April. So if you have any questions, go to www.losgatosca.gov/keep and feel free to contact me. My name is Shalane Hammock, and my number is 408-399-5778, or you can contact me at my email, which is shammock@losgatosca.gov.
Thank you, Ms. Hammock. Moving on to our consent calendar. Does any member of council wish to pull a consent item? Seeing none, does any member of the public wish to pull a consent item? I see a hand. Can you come forward and state which item and why you would like that pulled?
My name is Jeff Lockridge, 109 Paseo Laura. I would like to pull item number 1. That was from the March 24th meeting about the traffic mitigation and construction fee, specifically about the construction fee.
All right. And we will pull that, and we will hear that right after the rest of the consent calendar presumably gets approved. Thank you. So looking for a motion on the remainder of the consent calendar. Councilmember Spector?
Thank you. Move to approve the consent calendar with the exception of 1B.
Vice Mayor? Second. Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Passes unanimously. So we will hear item 1. So would you like to come forward and speak? Mr. Lockridge.
Thank you. There was some information that that wasn't presented by staff to you about the construction fee. In 2010, the town council at the time, in the April 5th meeting, they actually went through the construction fee and determined that they were going to establish the construction fee at $1 per square foot. And for the next 2 years, they were going to raise it 50 cents because what the other jurisdictions that they found were already at $2.48, I think it was. So by starting it at $1 and raising it 50 cents a year for 2 years. So in 2012, it would have been $2 a square foot. And then if there was any kind of increase between 2012 and 2014, it would have been reflected in something that started at $2. And I think in the meeting, you used $1 as the starting point. I think it ended up being $1.12. And just with the idea that cost recovery is the major concern, it would make sense to me that that would be corrected so that even though it wasn't a decision that was made by council back then, it was, I think it was pushed to another meeting because the traffic mitigation fee was not something that they could decide at the time. So I think that the construction fee should be revisited and at least take what the council back in 2010 decided. So.
Thank you. Any questions for the speaker? Seeing none, Town Manager, do you have anything, answers for Mr. Lockridge?
Yes, what Mr. Lockridge brought up doesn't affect the minutes that are before you tonight for approval, and that is the action before the council. And with fees, there is no need for reconsideration, as has been explained by the town attorney. The council has discretion to set fees. So if the mayor or 2 members of the council wish to revisit the construction impact fee, we could schedule that for a future meeting for you to consider raising it further beyond what was approved at your prior meeting.
Thank you. Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Larson, is Mr. Lockridge correct that we should have been using a base of $2?
What the council had previously approved in 2010 was the $1 fee, and that wasn't increased to that level. There was no subsequent council action further raising the fee. There was discussion at that time at increasing it. That's why we built in to the proposal we presented to you on the 24th that there'd be an automatic increase every year that comes forward in the fees and charges, so we don't have that problem recurring. The council could certainly go back and revisit starting on the higher base if the council wished to do so.
Just to follow up, I just want to make sure I understand that if there was any interest in that, exactly what the process would be.
The mayor, per the council code of conduct policy and the agenda rules process, the mayor or two members of the council may ask for something to be put on a future council agenda, and then the mayor determines the scheduling of that in terms of load balancing for the council agendas. So the council, two members of council or the mayor could request addressing possible increases to the construction impact fee at a future council meeting.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other discussion? Seeing none, we'll look for a motion on item 1 on the consent calendar. Councilmember McNutt.
I'll move approval of the minutes of the March 24th meeting, agenda item 1B.
We have a second from Mr. Brzezinski. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Passes unanimously. At this time, we are moving on to verbal communications. If any member of the public wishes to speak for 3 minutes on any item that's not on the agenda, please fill out one of these cards. And so far, I only have one card, which is Brian Mekachuk. Can you please come forward?
Hi, Brian Mekachuk, 55 Roberts Road. I'm here as a member of Leadership Los Gatos, and I think there's 4 other people in attendance tonight, and I just wanted to say that going through that course, we've been through 8 sessions of the 10, and I have a much deeper appreciation of the work that the council members and the city staff do. So I just wanted to also compliment Ronnie, who organizes it, and she's put together a great agenda and is taking us through that. So just wanted to compliment everyone on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mekachuk. Are there any other cards? Seeing none, we will move on to our first public hearing, which is a conditional use application U-13-025, 165 Los Gatos Saratoga Road. The applicant is Alexander Holt, requesting a modification to a conditional use permit for a high turnover restaurant with beer and wine service. And they would like to add full liquor service and modify their hours of operation. And we have Ms. Marnie Mosley doing our staff report.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. The subject site is located excuse me, at the southwest corner of University Avenue and Los Gatos Saratoga Road. The previous tenant of the space was Hobie's Restaurant, who occupied the space from 2008 to 2012, while the current conditional use permit was issued to Baker Square in 1999 when they requested beer and wine service. The applicant occupied the space in 2013 and has been operating a fine dining restaurant. The applicant is requesting to modify their existing CUP from a high turnover sit-down restaurant with beer and wine to a quality or fine dining restaurant with full liquor service, and to reduce their hours of operation accordingly. The police department has not received any complaints or issues regarding the existing restaurant or operator, and the applicant believes that being able to offer his clients a cocktail with their meals is a necessary complement to his existing restaurant, and as conditioned, the project would meet the alcoholic beverage policy. The total permitted seating is not being modified, and the proposed reduced hours would remove the AM peak hour impact for this site. The Planning Commission considered this request on February 26th of this year and recommended approval of the modification subject to the draft conditions. As a result, staff recommends that council approve the application subject to those attached conditions. This completes staff's report. We are here if you have any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Mosley. Any questions for staff from council? Seeing none, any disclosures from council? Councilmember Spector, do you have one? No.
You're fast. Yes, I have not met with the applicants specifically on this application, but I have been in their restaurant several times since they opened.
Councilmember Brzezinski?
Neither have I met with the applicants, but I have also participated in the fine dining establishment that they are presenting us tonight.
I also have participated in dining experience at Holt's. All right, moving on to the public hearing. We will ask anyone who would like to speak on this topic to please fill out a card, and we'll call the applicant forward for, you have 10 minutes to present your, if you like.
Hello? It's working.
I do not have 10 minutes of words. I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Alexander Holt. I am 29 years old, and I recently moved to Los Gatos after meeting my wife, Sarah Holt. We moved into a place right by Visona Park, and we lived there for a little over a year and a half, and we're very happy to be a part of Los Gatos. We think it's a wonderful community and a great town to live in, and we like to build a successful business here and raise our future kids and let them go to our wonderful schools here. So the restaurant that we opened, we had a dream that we wanted to have a wonderful experience that was different than a lot of other restaurants. We wanted to bring high-quality products directly from the farms to the tables, using sustainability being one of our keywords, where as close as we can find products to the highest quality is where we have reached out. We have been to farmers market in Saratoga, in Los Gatos, Campbell, trying to find all these relationships with local little farmers that are more or less depending on our purchases, and we find that the quality that we find in a strawberry, for example, on the local Los Gatos farmers market versus when we buy it from a big corporation that purchases huge orders and ships it on trucks all over the world, and it finally gets to us, and you compare them to each other, and in our opinion, you can't even compare. And that's what we do pretty much with everything that we have in our restaurant. So that is pretty much the biggest differentiator between most restaurants and what we try to do. And we feel that with this fine dining experience that we're trying to create, it's very important to have the ability to serve a cocktail before dinner, during dinner, or after dinner as the complete package for a full experience. Equal opportunity to all the other restaurants that are around us, Manresa, Forbes Mill, Sin Sin, California Cafe, Wine Cellar, Giudecca, all establishments that have similar level of food and also considered quality restaurants, and they all have the ability to serve alcohol, liquor. So during the time we've been open now for 5-6 months, it's almost every night people come in and they say, well, you don't have a full bar? We thought this was a nice restaurant. Almost saying that if you don't have a full bar, being able to offer a cocktail, you're not considered a nice restaurant, which I think is incorrect. But we've been doing what we can with serving wine and serving beer, and it's a request that we get from a lot of local people that come into a restaurant, and that's why we decided to go through this long process of being in front of you guys, talking in front of people, being very nervous and everything to finally be able to, hopefully, be able to serve alcohol. Any questions?
Any questions from council? Councilmember Spector.
Thank you. The other agenda item this evening deals with entertainment and alcohol. And one of the things that comes up is with a liquor license is food. Are people just drinking liquor, or are they also eating food? You have a condition on your approvals that food service liquor must be accompanied by food. Is that a problem for you, or will you be able to comply with that?
It's not a problem for us.
Because you do have a bar kind of area there, and you understand that you will have to have food with your liquor?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Seeing none, at this time, I would like to call members of the public forward for 3 minutes.
Thank you.
To speak about this item, and we have several. The first is Ulf Veneris.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council. My name is Ulf Veneris. I've been a resident of Los Gatos for a year and a half now. I live on Frank Court. I think we're in Silicon Valley. There are 3 things that's important here. It's entrepreneurship, it's living a dream, and it's taking risks. If you look on Alex and Sarah, they have invested their life savings in this restaurant. It's not that they have external investors, it's their money. They're taking a risk, they're living a dream. We all know that starting a new business is a challenge. We can also see how they transformed the Holt's restaurant into a really nice dining place. It's not a bar. It's not a place where people go and just drink. They go there to eat. Now they're applying for a liquor license. I think we have an opportunity to give them their opportunity to compete on equal rights, equal game plan. They can offer a cocktail with their meal, and I think that's the right thing to do.
Thank you. Next speaker is David Gusera.
Good evening. While I am not a resident of Los Gatos, I live in Saratoga. My wife and I do own a business in Los Gatos, out of the envelope on North Santa Cruz, little advertisement there. And I'm also a realtor with Alon Pinnell Realty. From my perspective, I've been in Holt's Restaurant many times, and I do agree that I think to finish off, if you will, or complete the fine dining experience, having a cocktail before dinner or an after dinner drink would complement everything. From a business perspective, I'm always looking for new restaurants where I can take my real estate clients. And I have not been able to take them to Holt's because I have a lot of clients who like to have a cocktail with dinner, and therefore I'm not able to use that establishment. So from that perspective, from a personal perspective, I think, again, it would complement the dining experience. As a local businessman trying to run a real estate business, I would like to see another establishment that I could use for business events. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Sharon Mondial.
Hi, I'm Sharon Mandel. I live in San Jose, but a good bit of, short of my daughter's college tuition, which goes to Texas, a good bit of the rest of my money comes to Los Gatos and Commerce. Holt's has become sort of my new favorite restaurant, and I personally don't need the liquor license. However, I also bring friends who, they're not going there to drink. They're going to have dinner with me, but they have one gin and tonic with their meal, and they're used to having that, and I think there's no reason they shouldn't be able to do that here to complement such a great place. The other thing I wanted to talk to is, since becoming a regular there over the last 3 or 4 months, I've gotten to know Alex a little bit, and I'm sure one of your big concerns as city council members is the responsibility with which he'll treat this additional responsibility. And you go in there, every night this man is in the restaurant, training his staff, making sure they're treating the customers right, personally greeting the customers, making sure they're having the kind of experience they want. And this dream and vision he talks about is very real, it's very apparent. It's a classic Silicon Valley entrepreneur story, it's just not high tech. And I just want personally to see him be successful and have an opportunity to do that, because it's a place I want to frequent for a long, long time.
Thank you. Next speaker, Cliff Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council members. My name is Cliff Olson. I live at 190 Railroad Avenue in Ben Lomond. I'm employed by Alex and Sarah. I'm, in a sense, speaking tonight from all of us that work the front of the house for the restaurant. You've heard this evening about how our customer base looks to, if at a restaurant like Holt's, looks to have a drink, expects alcohol. From an employee, those of us in the front of the house are in essence commissioned salespeople. You're all familiar with what our hourly wage is. Where we make our revenue, the reason that Alice can hire quality employees is you, our guests. Being able to offer more alcohol, being able to offer a wider variety brings customers back, enhances their experience, increases our guest check average, and means we have more money to spend at home and locally. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Olson. That was the last speaker card I have. And Mr. Holt, if you'd like to come forward, if you have anything else to add, you're welcome to do so at this point in time. You have 5 more minutes.
Definitely not going to take 5 minutes. I just wanted to thank all these nice people that took their time to come in tonight and say those nice words. I even teared up a little bit. And thank you, Mr. Mayor and the council members, for listening to us and for letting us be here today. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, we will close the public hearing and we will move on to council for questions, comments, motions. Councilmember Spector.
I'm prepared to make a motion, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to move that we make the required findings included in Attachment 1 and approve conditional use permit U13025 as recommended by the Planning Commission, and adopt a resolution of approval with recommended conditions for a conditional use permit CUP to modify an existing CUP for a high turnover sit-down restaurant with beer and wine service to a quality restaurant with full liquor service, and to modify their hours of operation on property zone C2, Attachment 2.
Vice Mayor.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed, none. It passes unanimously. Moving on to our next public hearing. Zoning Ordinance Amendment A-13-04 and Town Code Amendment regarding live entertainment. The applicant is the Town of Los Gatos. Our staff report is being done by Mr. Ordonez.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Erwin Ordonez for Community Development. What you have before you this evening are proposed amendments for the alcoholic beverage policy and 2 new ordinance amendments regarding live entertainment for the town code and the zoning ordinance. To start with, we'd like to give you a little bit of background regarding this particular council study issue. The issue stems from the 1994 alcoholic beverage policy and the amendments that were done in 2001 that were initiated at the behest of council. Both of those documents discourage entertainment establishments with alcohol service and require adoption of standards by the town for a permit process in order to allow entertainment with restaurant and bars. In 2010, the town council initiated an entertainment permit process to prepare that the entertainment permit process in conjunction with approving a few conditional use permits for establishments that currently have that approval. Also in 2010, the town recognized that there were current trends by way of new modern dining, cuisine and food service, as well as additional new uses such as wine bars and wine tasting venues, and encouraged staff to incorporate those trends in the proposed revisions for the alcoholic beverage policy. In 2011, Council and Planning Commission held a series of, or had a study session, included stakeholders, solicited input, and staff researched various jurisdictions and policies with regards to the alcoholic beverage policy and the inclusion of live entertainment uses. In 2012, staff also conducted additional stakeholder meetings with existing business owners and the community. And then in December 2012, Council convened another study session to basically review the findings from the stakeholder meetings. As a result of the December 2012 Council study session, there was direction given to staff regarding the proposed alcoholic beverage policy and the live entertainment uses. And there was direction regarding additional community outreach. In September 2013, staff basically drafted proposed amendments to the alcoholic beverage policy as well as the draft live entertainment ordinance and conducted the additional community outreach. Staff basically conducted a meeting with additional residents in town as well as members of the business community operating the restaurants and bars. In terms of the proposed changes, there's actually 2 components. There's, again, the alcoholic beverage policy, which was adopted by resolution, and then there are the 2 town code ordinance amendments. There's proposed amendments to Chapter 3, which is a new live entertainment permit process, and then for the land use regulations, which is Chapter 29 of the town code. With respect to the alcoholic beverage policy refinements, what staff is basically proposing is to expand the meal definition to include the small plates and certain type of appetizers. Again, this takes into account sort of changing trends in terms of dining and the different cuisine that's now available. The revisions also allow alcoholic beverage service for restaurant patrons while they're waiting for their seating at the tables. The proposed changes also include definitions for retail wine establishments, such as wine bars, and then tasting establishments for beer and wine. The alcoholic beverage policy also establishes new linkages for the brand new entertainment process and for operating agreements. In terms of the proposed live entertainment ordinance, there were a series of concepts that came out of the council study sessions in terms of levels of review. And there was also a desire for council to have a process that was easy to understand and simple. And as a result of that input, staff basically collapsed the 3 levels of review that were being discussed in December 2012 into 2 basic levels. And the reason for this is this pretty much mirrors what our existing process is for conditional use permits. We have 2 tiers, and staff felt that it was very advantageous to also simplify this process. So as it was drafted initially, there was a level of review for the Development Review Committee and then also council. What you have before you this evening is actually 2 levels of review based on the Planning Commission recommendation for the Planning Commission to be the lower level for minor permits, and then also for Town Council for any uses that have late night hours or alcoholic beverage service. The other key aspect of the proposed policy changes in terms of the ordinance is that they really focus in on components that will impact or have the potential to impact quality of life. You have late night operations past 10 p.m. and the inclusion of alcoholic beverage service. The proposed changes also include standard notification. As a result of the Planning Commission input, the standard notification for the new entertainment permit process will be the standard public hearing notification of 300 feet. Additional key concepts include trying to leverage the existing town code regulations, and these include zoning ordinance regulations and definitions, as well as existing noise ordinance and the noise maps, as well as the existing town code sections for amusements and entertainment permits. The ordinance now also includes definitions for live entertainment uses. The ordinance before you has both minor and major live entertainment uses. There are also requirements for any proposed uses for late night hours or alcoholic services to also include operational agreements with the entertainment permit. And the new ordinances basically establish standards for the application, public review, permitting, and operation. And the new ordinance also specifies that the live entertainment uses will be ancillary to the primary permitted uses on at these locations that are approved. There was considerable discussion at the community outreach meetings in terms of what the proposed ordinance should or should not do, and so we wanted to clarify for the council this evening and for the public what's being proposed. In terms of the live entertainment ordinances, it basically requires that business operators proposing new live entertainment uses to obtain a live entertainment permit through this established process. It's going to require an operational agreement for any proposed use that includes late night hours or alcoholic service. And there's going to be an integration of the proposed operating agreement, which will set standards for the uses with those proposed uses, again, late night or alcoholic beverage service. And it also establishes the town's ability to suspend or terminate the entertainment use that's related to a proposed use. This was something that was very important for the community because there was considerable discussion at the stakeholder and outreach meetings regarding the limitations with the conditional use permits running with the land. And there was a desire that should there be any issues with an entertainment use, that there was going to be a mechanism that was separate from the conditional use permit to be able for the town to terminate that use. So this is incorporated in the entertainment permit process. In terms of the entertainment ordinance, there's also a lot of concern from existing businesses, so we wanted to clarify that the new ordinances do not change an existing business's conditional use permits if that business proposes no change or no new live entertainment uses. There are certain businesses in town, and you'll see a little bit later, that do have live entertainment already permitted, and with their conditional use permits, they would be retained. The live entertainment ordinance, as proposed, does not require an operating agreement or live entertainment permits for an existing business with a conditional use permit. Again, we're not going back retroactively. So the only thing that would happen would be if the existing businesses were to do something else that would trigger modification of the conditional use permit. As part of that review, an operating agreement could be required by the town as part of the review. And then, more importantly, there was also discussion about whether or not the live entertainment permit was all of a sudden going to give additional rights. And we wanted to clarify that the ordinance does not eliminate the town's ability to review a conditional use permit. So, irrespective of the entertainment permit, if there's a problem with a basic use on a site because of the conditional use permit, the town will still have the ability to review that conditional use permit and take necessary action if there's any violations of that conditional use permit. In terms of the process, there was a desire to have something understandable, and this may look familiar to the council because this is very similar to the matrix that the council reviewed in December 2012, but again, this is simplified. So as council's desire, we basically streamline this so there's now 2 tiers, which mirror the restaurant tiers that the town has right now. There's a minor permit that, based on the Planning Commission's recommendation, would be heard by the Planning Commission, would be at a public hearing, would require the 300-foot noticing, and this would be for uses that do not include live entertainment beyond 10 p.m. or no alcoholic service. Major permits, however, would that do include live entertainment past 10 p.m. or alcoholic service would automatically have review by the Planning Commission for recommendation and then final action by the council. We also tried to provide you in this matrix, because there was a desire from council and also from the community, to try to understand how this would affect existing uses. So you'll see on the left-hand side of this matrix here, existing uses and what would be required in terms of the type of permit process. So you have an existing bar requesting jazz performances before 10 p.m., after 10 p.m., and because it's a bar, there's alcohol service. That would trigger council review. Then you have an existing restaurant, again, with live entertainment past 10 p.m. That would cover or require council review. And then you have existing uses that are before 10 p.m. without either, and those could be reviewed by the Planning Commission for final action. In terms of the review process, I noted earlier there were the outreach meetings, and then there was the actual formal Planning Commission review of the proposed refinements to the alcoholic beverage policy and the 2 draft ordinances. Planning Commission reviewed the study issue on September 25th, made recommendations to staff in terms of proposed changes. Staff returned again on October 9th and presented those changes to the Planning Commission. Planning Commission on the 9th came back with these recommendations to council. These recommendations are actually detailed in your staff report, so I won't go into detail with my presentation, but just going over, there's the Planning Commission required or suggested definitions for entertainment establishments. Those have been included, and they're wanted to have additional definitions for restaurant, separate bar, and indoor use. They wanted to clarify the differences between restaurants, retail, and wine bar uses. There was also commentary from the Planning Commission regarding the code enforcement process. There was a desire by the Commission to actually have staff describe the complaint process and tracking, as well as recommendations about staffing levels for code enforcement and when the code enforcement officer should be available. There was also discussion from the Commission regarding parking and intensification of uses. Those are detailed, I believe, on pages 8 and 9 of your staff report, as well as the concentration issue. The Commission basically requested that staff provide an impact map, very similar to the impact map that the Planning Commission and Council are familiar with regards to formula retail for both the downtown. And in your packet, both as the desk item, which includes a town-wide map, as well as the staff report, there are 3 maps for the different types of restaurant uses that show the concentration. And then we have enlarged versions also for the public to be able to view. This is the town-wide map with the little dots that show red being full liquor, yellow beer and wine, blue as no alcohol, and then the shaded areas as commercial zones. This shows the concentrations townwide in different locations. As you can see in the map, the majority are downtown and along Los Gatos Boulevard. This is a map that basically shows the restaurants in the downtown. Again, a breakdown showing the uses with alcohol service, no alcohol service, and the ones with a separate bar. And then we have a separate map here in terms of the businesses with a standalone bar that also include live entertainment. And then again, the concentrations in the downtown, and this breaks down everything into full liquor versus beer and wine, and then no service at all. In terms of the action before you this evening, staff is basically recommending that council consider the comments and issues from the Planning Commission and any public testimony to make the findings that are noted in your staff report as attachment 8, and to approve the recommendations, the recommended amendments that are shown in attachment 21 for the resolution, and then for the ordinance amendments which are shown as attachments 9 and 10. And this concludes staff's presentation. I'm available for questions or comments.
Thank you, Mr. Ordonez. So, Mr. Larson, earlier today we had some correspondence about organizing the discussion, and you have some comments on process.
Pursuant to our discussion, Mr. Mayor, staff just provided an option for the council, if you so desired, to structure the discussion. As usually occurs now at this part of the meeting, there'd be questions to staff regarding the staff report and recommendations, to be followed by public testimony and then council discussion and action. So what staff was recommending, given this is a complex issue that's been before the council, the mayor may wish to structure the discussion. First, any general questions regarding the staff report and discussion, to be followed by the alcoholic beverage policy recommended changes, then the live entertainment ordinance changes, and to be concluded with the zoning ordinance changes. Obviously, it's up to the mayor and council to structure their discussion and questions as they wish.
Thank you, Mr. Larson. Would like to just poll the council on the process, if they're okay with that. Show me. Councilmember McNutt.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm still not quite following because, so 2 questions, and we'll take alcohol beverage. I have a lot of notes, so if we're going through section by section and conveying questions or clarifications, we do that now before the public testimony? Is that what you were thinking? And then my second question is, given the complexity and the likelihood of a lot of changes, at least for me, is it the expectation that we would actually finish this tonight, or that you would gather the notes and come back? I'm a little concerned about if we start with the expectation that we're going to be able to capture everything and have an edited document that we can all understand and vote on tonight. That doesn't seem realistic to me.
One of the alternatives that is always available to the council would be to continue the matter to a date certain with specific direction to staff to bring back requested changes. And that is the second alternative on page 2 of the staff report. That will clearly be based on the council's discussion and direction. In terms of the section that the council usually does now following the staff report is to follow up with questions and clarifications to staff. And we would recommend, as we discussed with the mayor, doing that document by document and even section by section or page by page if desired by the council.
So I just wanted to know if we're doing that part now or after public testimony. So I'll wait and get direction from the mayor on what he wants to do.
Thank you. Vice Mayor.
I just had a question for the mayor and or Mr. Larson. What if I have a question that it's a global question, that it does not fit into one of your categories?
We tried to provide for that opportunity with the opening questions about the staff report or the presentation in general. So I think that's where global questions would fall.
And I assume that's the same for global comments when we get to that point.
When you get to that point. We were just following the traditional process the council uses, which is staff questions prior to public testimony.
Okay, I'll try to figure out where my question falls.
Councilmember Spector.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to ask general questions, but I'm not going to make any comments yet. One thing that staff presented was an operation agreement. If we went that route, how would the public be aware of the existence and terms of such an agreement?
The operating agreement would actually be required normally by either the conditional use permit, or if it was a live entertainment permit, it would be a public record after it was drafted and executed. It would be available in the community development offices for review, just like the conditional use permit conditions of approval.
Well, then let me follow up on that. We are in the process of placing CUPs on our website. And as I understand it from prior council meetings, the bars and restaurants were going to be first up. What is the status of that? And what is the thought process from staff with regard to putting the operating agreements electronically available?
I can speak to the status of the conditional use permits. We actually put them online last week, but we are testing them in-house to see how it's working and to see if it's customer public friendly in finding it. And so we're working with that right now. So they are, for those uses, they are available, as well as a chart to help people have a summary of what that use is permitted. It is possible that we could look at providing the operating agreements as well online as a part of this process.
Councilmember Spector.
Thank you. One more general question. With regard to code enforcement, right now, does the town have any proactive code enforcement on anything related to entertainment, bars, restaurants?
Not proactive, it's customer complaint based.
And what is the status of code enforcement in any regard as it relates to days of the week, hours of the day?
We have a contractual service, and they are working 3 days a week in responding to complaints.
And they would respond to what complaints?
Complaints that they receive through the code compliance website if they file a complaint, or if they call staff and file a complaint. And there's certain complaints that are received through the police department, and we are working with them to be aware of what those responses are.
Thank you very much.
We'll go with Vice Mayor Jensen.
Thank you. I have a general question, I guess. The businesses that we're contemplating affecting by what we may or may not do tonight all have CUPs. Is there any reason why any of the documents, language, conditions, et cetera, cannot be contained in a CUP and or aren't already?
No, except that the alcoholic beverage policy has language that says that you're going to establish a permit process, an entertainment permit process. So if council could amend the alcoholic beverage policy to eliminate that requirement.
If I could follow up, right, I'm looking at Exhibit A of our desk item attachment, Exhibit A of attachment 17 on our desk item, which is our existing alcohol policy. And under the general policy number 3, it says entertainment in association with an eating or drinking establishment may be allowed if standards and a permit process are adopted. So we could either just do a process for entertainment and incorporate it into our existing policy, or do what is being contemplated by the documents we have tonight, correct?
Yes, I mean, that's always an option for council, to amend the alcoholic beverage policy and to eliminate that requirement, and then have the entertainment uses reviewed as part of the conditional use permit process.
But that, what I just read, that's the driving force, correct?
Yes.
Essentially, for the regulatory scheme.
Yes.
Okay.
Councilmember Persinski.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I want to tell the staff I do appreciate the desk item. Clarified so many of the issues that were outstanding from the Planning Commission. Gives us an opportunity to move to better apply what was the discussion. Would you clarify again for me the issue of the live entertainment permit versus the conditional use permit and the value of that in relationship to where we have a use that is currently permitted and how it would be affected for a future application to come in to take over that particular use. I understand that this would allow us to do something that we have not been able to do in the past, is not have this run with the land. Is that correct?
That's correct. So as contemplated, if someone were to apply for an entertainment permit, that would go for an operator, and if it was a use that had alcohol service or late night hours, there would be an operating agreement. Again, that would be for the operator. Should there be any problems with that and the permit would be revoked, then they would need to apply for a new entertainment permit, or a new operating agreement would need to be established. If the property were to change hands, whoever took over the establishment that had live entertainment would be required to have a new live entertainment permit as well as an operating agreement for that specific operator. That's something that you don't currently have with a conditional use permit, since the conditional use permits run with the land.
All right, and we vetted that legally so that there isn't going to be any issue in our future where someone says, well, wait a second, how can you do this? That is true, Mr. Attorney? Yes. Okay. Secondly, there were an awful lot of issues that the Planning Commission brought up in their 2 meetings. And it was, I assume someone was taking really good notes because there was a very complicated set of dialogue that took place over those 2 times. My question for you is, more generally, do you feel that in the language of the documents in front of us for tonight, that you sufficiently captured all of the issues that were before you? Were there any issues that you felt were not able to be inserted into the documentation, particularly, I think it is the alcohol beverage policy, the attachment 11, or any of the documents that are in front of us that we would have to consider tonight?
There were a couple issues that were discussed by the Planning Commission regarding the revisions to, or even just the existing alcoholic beverage policy that currently stands, and just concerns that staff wasn't fully able to, based on town code language and the way such as parking is calculated, some of the changes that they wanted to staff to incorporate it, staff didn't feel we could do based on current town code. So the document was retained, so such as there was some discussion about not having, basically not having the food counter discussion or definition in the code or in the policy, and that any establishment that had a physical counter would be considered a restaurant with a separate bar, and that had never been included or discussed, and so it would have a significant impact on existing restaurants because it would have, that currently have a physical counter that operates by serving meals with alcohol. It would change their parking requirements. So that was an example of one. Erwin, do you have anything else to?
That being said, staff didn't agree with that aspect of the Planning Commission's recommendation because of the fact that it would have created a class of non-conforming uses in the downtown. And where staff was coming from and what you have before you this evening is actually an ordinance that's consistent with the existing town code and the zoning code, and then if it was council's desire, could actually get approved and implemented. The discussion that Marty noted from the commission was sort of a global discussion about intensification of uses, and there was a desire to potentially look at that, but that was a broader discussion that went beyond alcoholic beverage uses. It went more along the lines of how the town would define other uses potentially as well with regards to parking and intensification. In your staff report, we tried to give you some guidance regarding the existing town policy regarding traffic intensification, and then the practice of the Planning Commission and Council looking at changes in use and hours of operation and additions of square footage for defining intensification. So we tried to stay on solid ground for the council with regards to these documents.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor Jensen.
Following up on the intensification of use issue, I actually have 2 questions. One is, The intensification of use, as I understand it, the discussion at the Planning Commission was the staff said it's not an intensification of use unless it's 5 or more peak hour trips, correct?
That was part of it, but there's also incumbent in the definition of live entertainment use, or the addition of live entertainment. You have to sort of look at the main use. So if the main use is a restaurant and someone wants to include a strolling minstrel as a live entertainment use, is that necessarily an intensification? And in staff's opinion, the restaurant use was the main use, and that was what was driving the parking.
So what I'd say, if he's a really good strolling minstrel, maybe. If he's plays an accordion, maybe not. But I think the issue is that you're attracting people to an attractive use, which causes more traffic to come downtown, which causes there to be a parking issue, which potentially causes parking to bleed over into the neighborhoods, which may, so let's imagine that the council wanted to actually look at the definition of intensification of use for this kind of thing. How would we go about doing that?
That itself could probably be a separate study issue, because again, it has global implications beyond just the restaurant issues and some of these uses.
And my separate related question is on the, maybe you can explain to me a little bit more about what is a, quote, separate bar versus a food counter. And I noticed that among the examples you give us for a restaurant, existing restaurant with a separate bar, is Willow Street. And I can't imagine where the separation is there unless you're saying it's the back of the booth that go along the, run along the service counter and where the bar is. Is that all what it takes for a separation?
So there are existing restaurants with legally permitted separate bars, such as Willow Street. Staff is including language to help direct if a new application for or modification of one were to come through to request a restaurant with a separate bar, that kind of delineation would be required from here on out. But it doesn't necessarily mean that has been applied over the last 20, 30 years on these old CUPs that have restaurants with separate bars.
One last, so I make sure that I understand. A restaurant with a separate bar as currently defined, does it get more parking or less parking? Does it need to supply more parking, or does it need to supply less parking?
It needs to supply more parking. It's
by a factor of what?
So restaurants with separate bars in the downtown require 1 parking space for every 3 seats. And then a restaurant without a separate bar in the downtown requires 1 space for every 4 seats.
Thanks.
All right. We have Councilmember McNutt.
Thank you. So 2 questions. One is to follow up on this separate bar issue, which I think we'll get into more detail later. But where I thought the Planning Commission was getting confused, but maybe I'm the one who's confused on the definition, is you have a standalone bar where you can go and have a drink. You don't have to have any food. You have a restaurant with a bar where you can go in and have a drink with no food, or you can go in and have a meal with a drink, as opposed to a restaurant with alcohol service where you have to have the food. So it's not, in my mind, it's not so much the physical, I know there's how it's defined right now, it's not so much the physical configuration as your ability to drink without food, as opposed to other ones where you can sit at the bar while you're waiting for your table, but you at some point have to have food. Am I getting that in the right gist here?
Yes, it ultimately sprouted from the discussion that while there are conditions in restaurants, or there's been quite a few restaurants over the last 5 to 10 years that have instituted a counter environment within their restaurant, their conditional use permit requires them to serve food with alcohol throughout, whereas the concern was that the Planning Commission believes that blurs the line, and that generally people go in and believe they can order just alcohol from that counter, and occasionally that happens. Is what they were saying, and so they wanted to direct the language accordingly.
Yeah, and I understand that, and we'll probably be working on that language, but I do know that when we started getting really strict on, one reason was because there were appearing to be too many restaurants with a separate bar where you can just go in and take advantage of the bar portion and not get into the restaurant portion. My other question is on enforcement. I'm assuming that a lot of the concerns that came up and the questions about enforcement are not necessarily going to be part of these documents, but part of the CUP enforcement work project that's coming along in the next couple of months. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Councilmember Spector.
Thank you. Following up on, I think Mr. Brzezinski was talking about items that the Planning Commission touched upon that we may or may not have been discussing so far. And one of the things related to intensification of use that the Planning Commission referenced was whether or not these ordinances need an environmental impact review because of the intensification of use. Not whether there is or is not, but the issue arose. And it seems to me that we have nothing in our staff report following up on what was stated by the Planning Commission, specifically Mr. O'Donnell.
As part of the application review process, just like other development applications, you'll have a certain requirement in terms of the applicant for describing the use. You're going to still have staff be able to take a look at what's being described and make a determination, just like you do now with other types of permits, as part of either a tech review or if it's staff level review in conjunction with our colleagues in the police department, to be able to make sure that the proposed use fits into specific categories. With the bulk of these uses, what you're going to have are existing facilities, and it's the addition of an additional use with an existing use and an existing operator. Every once in a while, you may have someone coming up with a live entertainment use with a brand new restaurant from scratch, but there aren't too many of those locations left here in town. As you saw earlier, you're usually going to get an application for an existing business, probably wanting to add an additional use to try to enhance their business operation. But staff would look at that level of review to make sure that that use wasn't creating a particular impact. For example, if somebody were to propose I guess it'd be some sort of new technology type of entertainment permit that we can't think of right now, that all of a sudden was drawing more people for that use than the existing restaurant use, that it would be cobbled together. Staff would probably take a look at that and then try to get additional information. And if it was something that couldn't fall into a category that was listed as an exemption for existing facilities, and that potentially could probably trigger additional environmental reviews. But as it stands right now, we don't believe that that is going to be the case. We believe that the majority of these will be ancillary uses to an existing use or to a use that has an existing conditional use permit.
Vice Mayor.
Just following up on that, going back to my theme about our existing policy and conditional use permits, the situation you're describing with an existing use wanting to add something, why couldn't that be an application to modify their conditional use permit?
It actually could. The only thing that it wouldn't address, which was what Councilmember Brzezinski raised earlier, was that desire of the town to potentially terminate a live entertainment use that was not performing.
So, for example, the current alcohol enforcement policy does actually address entertainment, but just in terms of having procedures in place, which strikes me could be done in a number of ways. But part of it is an enforcement section, which has, 5 different reasons why a use could be terminated under 292310 of the town code, including number and types of calls for service, complaints received from residents, number of arrests for alcohol. So why couldn't we actually enforce the conditional use permit and use that as our enforcement procedure?
You could use that, but it would probably be a little bit longer in terms of process. I was here when the commission actually revoked a conditional use permit for the O'Shea's Bar. There was an investigation by the council, there was a hearing, but it's a lengthier process. What's envisioned with the live entertainment permit process is that they actually could be revoked after a review at the planning commission or council. But it was envisioned to be a little bit quicker than the regular conditional use permit process.
Vice Mayor.
So if the council were so inclined, it could add time limits, et cetera, to the existing section and address that, correct? Say, if you have one complaint, if you have two complaints, then it goes to planning commission, rather than enact an entire new set of regulations. We could simply add it to that if we wanted to.
If that was a purview of the council to create a process, that's something that I guess could be incorporated in that policy.
Okay.
Any more global or general questions? Seeing none, we can move on to the alcohol and beverage policy questions. Councilmember McNutt.
I'm not going to ask my questions now. I'm going to, I kind of like to hear the public testimony, so it would be my suggestion that we move into that next, and then, because I think if we start going, my perception is once we start going into depth in each one of these, it's going to be detailed, and it would be beneficial to hear from the public first. So that's my recommendation.
Further questions from council at this time on anything before the public testimony? Seeing none, we'll bring the public forward to speak. The first speaker is Linda Lazat.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Linda Lazat, 1741 Frobisher Way, San Jose, California. I really appreciated the dialogue so far. You've touched on pretty much everything I was going to say, but I did want to first congratulate staff on the work that they've done. I think it's something that the town has needed, and this is a great stab at it, and I think it's a balanced approach, and whatever happens, there'll be certainty for the operators of the bars and restaurants in the town. I did want to comment on two things. First is the idea of a separate entertainment permit and the CUP. And from what I'm hearing and what I read in the staff report, and I think the Vice Mayor talked about this, is it really has to do with being able to get quickly to a bad operator, a bad actor. And I think it's still going to take the same amount of time. It's still going to take the same investigation, whether it's under a process to get rid of the entertainment permit or the CUP. And what could happen is you could have an absolutely bad operator. You get rid of the entertainment permit, you still have a bad operator. But if there was just one process where it was all in under the CUP, you might be able to get to impose some restrictions on a bad operator to make them a good operator. So I think that you may not solve the complete problem, and I think there's additional costs to the operators with two permits. There's additional time that they have to go through the process, and maybe some unintended consequences if they decided to transfer ownership. The entertainment permit doesn't go with them, and now the new owner has to go and get it. And I just think that would add to some hoops that they have to go through if they wanted to just move on. And then the issue about the separate bar. I know in the staff report there's a alternative definition, and I think that definition speaks more to what actually is happening in this town and in other towns where you have a restaurant, they have a little section that has where people can sit and have a drink, and it's not separated. It's not a separated portion in the facility. And so going over to attachment 11, item 10, it talks about alcohol service can be provided prior to a meal service within a designated enclosed waiting area. Well, that's not what's happening right now in a lot of restaurants. And so to put that in your alcohol policy, I think is going to, make it difficult for new operators to come in and have to put in a separate designation when all they want is a waiting area for people to have a drink before they have a meal. So I think the Vice Mayor and Councilmember McNutt hit on those issues with regard to this physical separation that needs to take place. So I'd like to see that. My time is over. All right, I'm done. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mrs. Lazat. We have a question for you. Ms. Lazat, if you could come back.
Ms. Lazat.
Yes, Councilmember Spector.
This issue of the entertainment permit running with the land with a CUP or not running with the land if it's a permit, I understand what you were saying. However, what about the flip issue that the town is able to control whether or not successive users get an entertainment permit? And so that would give us more oversight. What I heard you saying is that that is not necessarily a good idea, and I wanted to understand that better.
Well, I have to tell you that as a former council member, I'm very torn on this issue, because if I were sitting up there, I'd probably want as much control as possible over the users. And so running with the land makes that a little more difficult, except that if the conditions are written properly, if the operating agreement is written properly, if you have, I think staff is asking for an additional code enforcement people. I think the issue is about whether or not you can control and monitor these operators. And I think that you can do that with a conditional use permit. And if it's in an area where you want this type of an establishment, what's the harm in having it run with the land if this is what you want in this particular area, so that when it's transferred over to another operator, you still have the opportunity in the operating agreement to look at their past history, look at their business plan, and say, well, we're not so sure, so we're going to give, put a condition in here that we're going to look at your entertainment permit or your entertainment venue portion of this in a year. And if it hasn't been going well, it's just coming out of your CUP. And so I think you could handle it that way. Thank you. Anyone else?
Further questions? Seeing none, we'll call up the next speaker, Candace Fowler. And I also invite anybody else who would like to speak on the subject this evening to please fill out a card. This is the last card I have in my possession. Oh, I see more coming. Okay, good.
Mr. Mayor, Town Council, I'm Candace. You've seen me here before in support of the new CUP. I would like to also say I respect thank you. I respect all of the work that the Planning Commission has put into this and the thought. As with the surveys, you can clearly see that there are issues between residents and town workers, and the fact that I really feel you've addressed all of those issues in the new CUP. Also, too, I think the real key here is that in the new CUP is offering a case-by-case basis so that established business owners can apply for their live entertainment permit. We're trying to get our live jazz back into Carrie Nations one night a week on Mondays is what this has been the thrust of me being involved in this at the Town Council. It's been quite an education. Thank you. But we would like to say a case-by-case basis of what will make the difference. We're not going to always, I don't think we're ever going to come into common ground with the residents. I think that's just a fact of life. But I would like to recommend that you do go ahead and pass this new ordinance, and sooner rather than later, accepting the fact that it is dependent upon each business, specifically individual. I don't feel it came out right. So again, I want to thank you very much, and I do want to thank the Town Planning Commission. The two of them, I feel, have taken a lot of time and a lot of thought process in it and trying to look at both sides. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker is Chris Wiley.
I've come here, I'm Chris Wiley at 544 University Avenue, across the street from the bocce court. I double looked at this map. This map goes down University Avenue and kind of stops at Town Terrace. Is it going to extend over towards Blossom Hill to catch Tommy's and to catch the bocce court? I know you're not allowed to answer that question right now. And the reason I say that is, when we gave the permit, and I have a copy of it, plus the amended one that was amended afterwards, on the conditional use permit for the bocce court, they have a lot of live entertainment in there, even if it's just their loud noise. They, this weekend, rented it out to a facility that came in very early on Saturday morning and started setting up, finished it about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and then came back Sunday morning at 5:45 a.m. to dismantle. I walked across the street at 6 a.m. to say, what are you doing here? 2 huge flatbeds. And they said, oh, we'll be quiet. Well, that didn't turn out to be the case. When you're moving big 2x4s and planks in and out of the bocce court, it wakes everybody up. That's a quad in there, and the noise ricochets off the walls. Now, I've been told, did you report it? Did you call somebody? Well, no, this time I emailed somebody. I don't like calling the police all the time. We have other situations out there with traffic and people going through the stop signs and parking issues, which actually come from the bocce court. So the entertainment, the live entertainment, I think when you talk about conditional use permits, we need to relook at some of these as to what is going on, because the item itself has kind of outgrown the neighborhood. And we started as a small mom and pop thing with a few league nights, and it grew from there and from there. We actually have some nights 4 or 5 buses, huge buses that hold 80 people coming into there, and cars on top of that. So they're the biggest entertainment in town, I think, on a regular basis, Monday through Friday and occasionally Saturdays and Sunday nights, occasionally. So I think my question has always been, what's going to enforce this and readdress this and look at it? A proactive code person, et cetera. It needs to be looked at more, and I'll be happy to put more stuff in writing, because I don't think you're going to be able to resolve this in one night.
We have a question from Councilmember Spector.
I want to circle back to the enforcement. You said some things should be proactive, then you said that you sent an email this time because you didn't want to take people away from their more important work. In your ideal world, what would enforcement be?
I think we should have a code enforcement come out when the noise is reported, whether it be by me or another neighbor. Right now, it's been ignored all these years. And I don't know if it's fines or what. Now, let me go back a little bit. Tom Albanese has worked with us. He's put no parking signs on my property. The guys, when I call them, or my roommates, or the neighbor down the street calls them and say, hey, it's getting too loud, they start to do stuff. They've been chasing buses all over the place. The other night, they parked up and down University Avenue. Not one cop, not one code enforcement said, this bus does not deserve to be on University Avenue in front of private homes. That was between Andrews and Highway 9. 2 huge buses. Now, you can't miss them. They're there. I don't know if the little guy in the cart is permitted to go after them. I don't know. But they actually run their engine, and they shake our houses.
Thank you.
We have a question from the Vice Mayor.
A couple of follow-ups for you. I read your email and your earlier letter, and I just want to make sure I understand that primarily what your complaint is, it's noisy, it's an intensification of use, there's a parking issue,
Huge.
And you don't get an adequate response when you complain. That is, there's no enforcement.
There's no enforcement, it's correct. That area also has a stop sign, 3-way, now 4-way, thank you. I got that changed just recently, which I really appreciate. But here again, the parking. It goes all the way so close to the corners, you can't see the pedestrians when they're coming around. And the cars, when they come down the street, so they don't even know if they can make that turn. So the cops must, I don't want to put it all on their shoulders, but I've called it in and nothing has happened. We have a car sitting out there in 530, for example, University Avenue, that's been there for a week. It's a person who flies away, somebody takes him in, and it's left there. But that car occasionally parks on the corner to block the proper turn. It needs to be red painted. I already got the stop sign moved to the correct space to stop the strolling stopping, but when the bocce court is completely filled, they actually park on the corner. Now, to me, when a policeman sees that, if he can't do it, he can get maybe the guy in the cart. Tag that puppy right away, because you're going to prevent other accidents. Right now, from 2:30 on, the traffic is horrendous on University Avenue, 2:30 to 5:30. Wait till Netflix goes in. Wait till some other stuff goes in. But the bocce court is no help. I don't want to blame them totally, but the parking, if they at least get the parking run correctly, they can prevent a few of the accidents that are at the corners. Did I answer your question?
And more than. Let me bring you back to the bocce court for a second. I think what I hear you say is that you don't have a fundamental objection with the bocce court if it were to follow the conditions that were put in place.
Yes, but
Correct?
they're very vague
Okay.
they're very vague in their conditional use permit. Are they, at one point, when I went to every meeting, and I backed the bocce court to be there, I went and educated the neighbors, there was an agreement that was always open up to the public. It's been closed to the public, and they have big entertainment at night that gets rather loud. So is this under the conditional use permit that they have to, okay, I was originally told this was not going to happen. If it was, 3 days notification was going to be given to the neighbors, and a permit would be pulled for this kind of thing. It's forgotten about. And to answer your question, I don't want to put them out of business, but it has to be controlled somehow. I've actually said to Tom and Joe, I think you've outgrown the neighborhood. It's a great outfit to bring in entertainment, revenue, fundraisers are great. They just had one this weekend. But I don't think we anticipated that it would grow that big. I didn't anticipate it. I'm sure the neighbors didn't anticipate it, and everybody's kind of learned to live with the barking dog. But there are times when you get somebody new, and then it's my phone that, go see her, she'll turn it in. Well, I actually came the last time with a letter. I think it had about 48 signatures on it, and I only hit half the neighbors. So goes to show you that just the first 48 were concerned. I don't want to put them out of business. I've told that to Tom and Joe numerous times, but I just want them to enforce their own thing. Like Tom said in his email to me, he said, obviously I didn't have a manager there at 5:30 on Sunday morning to stop this. Well, if you look at your ruling, our own town ruling, 10 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday is when you can start making noise, not 8 o'clock. And they just kept working. Nobody came that morning and said, you have to stop till 10 o'clock. It just kept going.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I'd like to ask Mr. Larson if we could follow up on some of the things Ms. Wiley said about the red curb and the car being parked too close to the corner, and some of those issues that might create safety problems for the citizens.
Certainly, the police department can look at proactive enforcement for safety issues. The Transportation and Parking Commission is designated to look at on-street parking changes, and that's an issue. I think it's too late to put it on their meeting for this week, but on their next meeting, we could ask them to begin looking at that issue.
Police, I've already reported it. It's the street guys. They were there when they put up the new stop sign. They said totally, yes, it is our jurisdiction, not the police, for the red curb.
You're absolutely right, Chris. The cars parked too close to the corner is a police enforcement issue. Parks and Public Works can't take that enforcement action.
Right.
The changing of the curb is Parks and Public Works, and that goes through the Streets and Parking Commission.
Could we possibly send a staff member out there to meet with Ms. Wiley to cover some of these concerns and then see?
Okay, folks, I leave town as of Saturday for a long time, so it's this week.
We'll just have to go to Ireland. We'll meet with you this week, Chris.
Actually, sir, I've been called up again. I'm back to work.
We'll meet with you this week, Chris.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next speaker is Larry Arzi.
What are we doing? What are we doing? Some of you people asked that question on numerous meetings. What are we doing? You know, in your prepared documents from staff, they tell you there is no parking conflict for businesses that operate before 9 p.m. at night. They claim that parking lots have plenty of space after 9 o'clock. But this is no excuse for not making entertainment permit applications to provide more parking per our existing regulations. Or do we really want our parking lots filled up after 9 o'clock at night with entertainment seekers? Why are we writing rules to make it easier to intensify the downtown instead of quieting it down? 9 p.m. is not the entertainment hour in our bedroom community. It is closer to the bedtime hour. Why on earth do we need entertainment to be ramping up when we are getting ready for bed? Retailing is not conducive in downtown after 6 p.m. because it's bad lighting, bad parking, and even worse, by adding an entertainment component a lot earlier than 9 o'clock is ill-advised. We have great parking and planning district regulations. They have served us well in lieu of entertainment ordinances. Why don't we just tighten them up and call intensification for what it is? More cars, more noise, more police enforcement. Tell your staff to stop reinterpreting it every time a friend of the town wants to open another wine bar or restaurant or music venue, or discover hidden space in their property. Be aware of what you're doing. Be aware of staff, better yet. Be aware of the powers you're giving them.
Mr. Arzi, we have a question for you from Councilmember Spector.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Arzi, let me make sure that I understand. Is it your position that we shouldn't have an entertainment component at all?
We already do. We've been taking care of it with our existing regulations for 50 years. We've done quite well. We've allowed entertainment in areas that don't cause problems, and we don't allow entertainment in areas that cause problems. So what are we doing? We're becoming a big city full of rules. We're making a plan, a procedure to allow people in. And oftentimes, you're not going to have a say-so about it. It's going to go on the staff. Staff will be able to make the decisions for you.
So is it your input that we should not have entertainment? Because I don't know when you say one place or the other. Are you saying we shouldn't have entertainment downtown, or are you saying we shouldn't have entertainment out of downtown?
I think we should go back to our original rules and not intensify the downtown further. This is intensification. Why change the rules in midstream? I don't think the community realizes that what is actually happening, that we're going to rev up at 9 o'clock and our parking lots are going to be filled to midnight or 11 o'clock.
All right, then following up on the intensification, assuming that there is some kind of entertainment, or assuming that there are big, more complete or fuller liquor licenses, what is your opinion with regard to parking? Is it your opinion that there is no more availability, or what?
Based on the way we're trying to accomplish the new parking district formula, I don't have much hope for a new parking district. Staff has let it be known that they want a monstrous parking district regulation formula. They want a lot of money, but we've gone through this before, and we ain't going to pay it. Certainly, I'm going to go down kicking and screaming if I have to pay another $30,000 over a 20-year period, and then and not have it enforced. We were good with our enforcements for 10 years. After the past 15 years, it's been staff interpretations.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
We have a question from the Vice Mayor.
Just wanted to follow up with you, Mr. Arzi, and understand exactly your position. Are you objecting to entertainment or objecting to the parking issues that entertainment creates?
I'm objecting to the intensification and parking issues that parking creates. I'm not against entertainment as long as they can provide more parking, close down by 9 o'clock, do what we've been doing for the past 35 years, having a small town.
Okay, let me just follow up with you. Assuming that the council were to just agree with you and say we don't need further regulation or a new live entertainment process, what would be your position if the council were to decide that really what it needed to do was revamp its regulations or interpretations with regard to what constitutes an intensification of use.
I think that would be delightful.
Okay, thank you.
Next speaker is Jeff Lockridge.
Jeff Lockridge, 109 Paseo Laura. It's a slightly different point of view here, but I just wanted to point out that although these revisions may seem clear to staff, I think that by combining alcohol, entertainment, and the zoning makes it much more confusing than it needs to be. Why not separate these items and have regulations that are more easily applied and possibly enforced? I can see where sometimes that businesses do need a combination of uses, but I believe these should be applied separately rather than combining them. Just seems a little confusing. Is there a compelling reason for combining these ordinance amendments? I may have missed the importance of combining these. It seems that if there was any enforcement issues, they would have to be handled separately anyway. So to combine them within a CUP would make something that could be fairly simple to something much more difficult to and too hard to enforce. It also doesn't make much sense to me to have this many rules and regulations without a concrete way of enforcing them. It doesn't make any sense. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Lockridge. We have a question from the Vice Mayor.
Mr. Lockridge, have you had an opportunity to look at the existing alcohol beverage policy?
I went through it briefly, but
Are you any position to comment on it?
not really.
Okay, thank you.
Next speaker is Lee Quintana.
Lee Quintana, 5 Palm Avenue. I guess I really have a series of questions or clarifications. Start out with some things on the entertainment policy. It's not even clear to me exactly what the town is trying to accomplish with the entertainment policy. What is the vision? Is it both the alcohol policy and the entertainment policy, I believe, have lots of language in it that says strongly discourage this, strongly discourage, and yet when you look at your your figure up there, of the 54 restaurants in the downtown area, 48 of them serve alcohol. And I think 14 of them have separate bars. How has our policy discouraged the proliferation of alcohol with restaurants, even though it says discourage, discourage, discourage? It's not clear to me why the findings for denial of the findings for an alcohol, I'm sorry, I'm getting confused here. Why the findings for the entertainment permit are proposed as findings for denial rather than findings for approval. It's harder to deny an application such as a subdivision application, which you have to find denial. You can't deny it unless you find specific findings than it is to approve something. Why is the LM, which is an industrial zone, included in the entertainment as an entertainment zone? Will the same reasoning that is used by restaurant owners to request full bar service because it means that they will be equal competition with other restaurants with full bar service, be used to ask for entertainment permits because the next restaurant or the next business down the street has an entertainment permit? I think the concentration issue, case by case and having a map, that's fine, but it seems to me there needs to be some kind of policy direction that clearly states a policy for concentration or non-concentration, a number per block, something of that sort. And I think another problem is that the way the town's commercial, I'm not going to have enough time, so I'm just going to stop right there.
Thank you, Ms. Quintana. At this time, that was the last speaker I had on the subject, so I'm going to take a short recess, a 5-minute recess, and then we will come back and have our discussion.
it's been suggested that perhaps we need to revisit our parking downtown, and that would be separate. But as I look at our existing alcohol policy, it addresses those things that are now being addressed in what we're looking at tonight, except for the fact that we've got something in there that says, if you want entertainment, we have to have a process in place. Well, it seems to me that we could put the process in place by just revamping our existing policy if we need to do that. But the real issue is that we don't have a good avenue for complaints. We don't have a good avenue to guarantee a response. And we don't have something set up for there to be a consequence. So we have residents and neighbors and business owners who come in and are all affected by the same things. And what they want to do is have an avenue to make a complaint. They want to get a response to the complaint, and they want a consequence to the complaint. Okay, so how do we accomplish that as a town? Well, we enforce our CUPs. And how do we do that? We ask our staff to do that. We, as a council, allocate funds for a 24-hour code compliance. Perhaps we develop an app where I can be walking down North Santa Cruz, point my phone at a business, it goes to somebody and it says, look, here's the truck that's loading stuff at 5:30 in the morning. And then we require our staff to actually respond to that. And then inform the business owner that there's a warning, and there's 1 strike, there's 2 strikes, there's 3 strikes, and then we do something. And there actually is an enforcement process in our existing policy. The thing it doesn't have in our existing policy with regard to the enforcement is timing of when the response has to happen, an avenue for a complaint, and outlining of consequences and what happens in certain things. It also doesn't include entertainment. It just says alcohol, but there's no reason we couldn't add entertainment. So I guess my general global thought is that if we were to enact everything that's been put in front of us, and I have to go back and say as a planning commissioner, yes, I definitely wanted rules because we kept looking at things and were asked to exercise our discretion, but we were told a policy is coming. And as a planning commissioner, you have to follow the town code policy. So as a planning commissioner, I really wanted one. But now I think that if we just establish what it is, we empower our planning commission to make those discretionary calls, and we don't front load the problem with more regulations that aren't going to get enforced, but instead we modify the simple thing that we have in place, and we address the issues that are causing us to get to this point, which are simply that we're not hearing complaints, we're not responding to them, and we're not having a consequence to them. And I think responsible business owners are going to recognize that they have to respond to that. They're going to put the security in place that they need to do, and if citizens know that they can actually get a response and a consequence, we may actually be able to do this with what we have in place. So that's why I say that before we go into the line-by-line edit, for what it's worth.
Councilmember Spector.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A question and then a comment. Question of staff is, can you just tell me in summary verbal fashion what the town would achieve if it modifies, if it changes the alcohol policy as it is drafted and in our folder, binder?
In terms of the alcoholic beverage policy, you would have the allowance for patrons waiting for a table service to be able to partake of the alcohol service without having to order a meal immediately. You would also have the ability to have the small plate appetizers, depending on which version that you looked at in terms of the alcoholic beverage policy. If you also picked up the Planning Commission language, there may be different definitions regarding the separation of bars, which was highlighted earlier as well. And then the tasting rooms and wine bar definitions as well would get picked up. And then you'd also have to, understanding where council's going potentially with this, is that you'd have to decide what you would do with live entertainment uses. if you kept it in there or took it out. As it currently stands and what's before you, there'd be the live entertainment uses, but subject to the live entertainment ordinance.
Thank you. Anticipating that we may be getting into a line by line, I actually don't know. We have a lot of materials. We have materials over the years. I want to commend the Planning Commission for culling it down as much as they did. But for me, I'm looking at it from a 30,000-foot level, not getting into the nitty and the gritty, because I have some foundational issues that would need to be addressed before I would be willing to even consider an amendment to the alcohol policy or the creation of an entertainment policy. And that's because we've been listening to neighbors and to businesses for a long time, and a business will want additional alcohol entitlements, or they'll want entertainment. Why? Because they want to make their business more viable, and that's understandable. That's what a business does. Now, what have the neighbors' concerns been, or the community's concerns been? Because they've been very consistent. They have been that the noise from the building is too loud, or the individuals who are exiting this building are too inebriated and are making a lot of noise, and then nobody does anything about it. So that is, in a nutshell, what we have heard year after year after year, hearing after hearing after hearing. And so for me, before I'm willing to get down and go through this word by word, and I'm going to sit here and listen to everybody else if that's what they do, but before I'm willing to get down and make decisions on a word by word basis, what I want to see is that we have code enforcement in this town. We have it 24 hours a day. And we have it proactive and reactive. So that is my threshold, and I would expect to see it in our next budget, which is coming up in May, to be enacted for years 2014 through 2015. So that's what I would be looking for. And on a more detailed, but also important to me, issue is noise. When staff was asked by the Planning Commission, how are you going to deal with the noise emanating from the buildings, let's say with entertainment? Well, they say we have the noise ordinance. Well, come on, give me a break. That noise ordinance is totally useless, and it always has been. What are you going to do? I'm going to stand outside a building and say, man, it's really loud. I think I'll call the code enforcement officer. It's really loud out here. But, we're in the digital age. And so you're actually able this day and age to have digital monitors that record, that keep the information. And if somebody who is only a little bit techie as I am can find that kind of equipment, I'm sure staff that is probably more techie than I am could have that, so we can monitor the noise level at all times and have that noise level be recorded and captured. So I would need a change to the noise ordinance, and I would need 24/7 enforcement, and then I'll start looking at the hundreds of thousands of words that are in our binder.
Other discussion? Councilmember Brzezinski.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Since we're on the global issues rather than the nitty-gritty at this point, I want to kind of give a little different angle to this. We are talking about the fact that that owners of restaurants with bars are focused on how they can include more people in their client base, and therefore they're going to offer a more extended alcohol service or entertainment. Almost as if everyone who goes in there is a visitor from out of town, rather than what our own community is asking for. And I think we have to be realistic of the fact that we are known as a restaurant hub, and we have earned that because we have some great restaurateurs in town. And I know that most of my friends like to find their culinary experience in downtown or on the boulevard, rather than to go out of town someplace else. And it's because we have provided that kind of a venue. Some people may not agree with this. Some people may think that the town closes at 9 o'clock. I don't think that's the case. I think what happens is that we have a pretty sophisticated community, and this sophisticated community includes not only their business and tech acumen, but also their focus on their entertainment, recreation, restaurant experiences, just like it focuses on, their use of the Jones Trail for recreation and hiking purposes. There are all kinds of things that our community is engaged in, right? Our community, the 30,000 people that I represent. And I think we would be short-sighted if we weren't to say, how do we accommodate that? How do we accommodate the offerings that we can make to our community for them to experience the kind of lifestyle that they want? And so, to me, it's a question of using everything that's been said to this point, including the issue of enforcement of our codes and enforcement of our expectations, that we want to focus on how we have good use of those particular venues that offer entertainment and food service, so that they protect the neighborhood from the noise impacts. But at the same time, let's not ignore the fact that our community is much more varied than perhaps something that is so restrictive that we can't continue to evolve ourselves as the community that we are. So I throw that out as a general point of view. I do think that some of the language of the program in front of us that's been developed by staff with the input of the Planning Commission is very valuable to us, because I think it's unrealistic, some of the things that we have in our language right now, such as it ignores the fact when you go into a restaurant and you are waiting for a table, you may want to order a drink. You may even actually be at your table and order a drink. If you look at the language and apply it absolutely rigorously, probably means you can't do that. And if that's the case, then we're not being realistic. So I don't want rules just to be able to somehow create some kind of control mechanism. I want rules that really benefit us and that show what happens. So for my purposes, I'm eager to go through the line by line. I think it's very complicated. I think it's maybe too complex right now. We need to simplify it because this should be a usable document. But I do think that there's a lot of it that is beneficial.
Councilmember Spector.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In my analysis that I hopefully just summarized, I just assume that our bars and restaurants were, for the most part, accommodating those individuals who live in our town, much more so than the visitors from out of town. And that's why I was trying to look at the interest of the business owner, which was to increase its viability, and the interest of those who are not the business owners, which is to have, to eliminate the noise and the interference with their lives at their home. And that is why I came up with the threshold issues of enforcement and of the actual effective noise ordinance. That's why I took the actually 30 issues that I found in our ordinances and culled it down to those two, as opposed to sitting here and telling you about the other 28.
Vice Mayor Jensen.
Just to expand on what I said earlier and to comment on Councilperson Brzezinski's comments, I hope it wasn't taken that I'm against bars and restaurants or entertainment, because I think that we have a flexible policy in place now that allows what we need to do with the exercise of a little bit of discretion. If we need to tweak this and add tapas or small plates, or yes, you don't have to stand in a closet and get your drink while you're waiting. You can actually wait at the bar that's been provided to you. That's all fine with me. But if I want to address the complaints that go with that, not the benefits, then I don't think I need all the documents we have in front of us. I think I need an avenue to complain a guaranteed response, and a consequence. And I don't think that that would end up restricting anyone who acts in a responsible manner. And if we consciously look at these CUPs and then enforce them, I think we'd end up with a good, not wide open, but a good focused policy. We have a good policy in place, but it needs enforcement, it needs noise, it needs tweaking in terms of where we have gotten left behind on the style of eating now. Like 9 times out of 10, I will sit at the counter and eat, not at a table. And we need just to allow people the flexibility to do what they want to do as a business owner, but allow the residents the assurance that if there's a problem with that business, they get a response and that there's a consequence. We put conditions, we spent all this time putting conditions on people and businesses because it's supposed to be a condition under which they operate. If they don't operate under that condition, there should be a consequence. And right now, there's no consequence. And what I see us engaging in the exercise of doing is putting a whole bunch more regulations in that then aren't going to get enforced, and there's going to be no consequence. And that strikes me as not a very practical thing to do.
Councilmember McNutt.
Well, this is an interesting turn of conversation. It's somewhat surprising, I think, because it's new thoughts. It's not necessarily bad thoughts. Might have been good to have had these thoughts a little earlier, because we certainly have invested a lot of time of staff and planning commission and community moving down a path that we may not be going down, which again is okay if that's not the right path. I do think that we need to separate, though, in our on our thoughts, the alcohol policy that we have been threatening to update for quite a while, and we keep saying, staff, why don't we have that? Why don't we have that? Now we have that, so I would hope that we would not disregard that, but we would take this opportunity to do those corrections and updates that we have been asking staff to incorporate. In terms of the entertainment policy half, it would be fine with me not to have it, because one of my concerns as I looked at this, where I was talking about unintended consequences, and there are some venues in town that I have been concerned about and how this would apply to them. Places like the History Club and the JCC and Venture Church and other faith institutions and private schools that have facilities, venues that work for entertainment. And I was going to spend a lot of time saying, what are we going to be doing with these folks? Because they were going to be in a hard place. I also have always been concerned about, we tend to focus when we talk about entertainment on the whole idea of a nightclub and late night, however you define that, whether it's 9 p.m. or midnight, and and alcohol and dancing and so on. My concern is, why can't California Cafe have a jazz pianist playing during brunch on Sunday? Right now, it's forbidden. We forbid it. And so how can we make things like that I don't consider to have tremendous impact easier? And if it's easier for them to come in for an adjustment on their CUP rather than going for a minor or a major entertainment permit, then that would be something that we could explore. So I don't know what we should do about this whole entertainment thing tonight, but I do hope that we could save something from all of this work and at least go through the alcohol beverage policy suggestion edits.
Vice Mayor Jensen.
I appreciate what Councilwoman McNutt is saying, but if you look at our 1994 policy, for example, under the general policy, we break out standalone bars and we break out restaurants with separate bars. We also break out, quote, entertainment establishments serving alcoholic beverages. When I read that, I think club. So if we want to tweak the alcohol policy to get the benefits and expand the definitions in ways we need to, like wine bar. What's retail wine bar? What's a tasting room? What's whatever? And put that in our general policy. I think that makes sense. But I think we have a lot of things in place already that where, for example, we could take it back to an ad hoc committee. I know that's our new favorite little thing, but it's not necessarily unreasonable. And we certainly have a precedent for reversing course if we think that makes sense. So the AHOZ, the North 40. I don't think, I hope that if we were to take that avenue that it would take a long time, but then it could also encompass those things that aren't addressed in those documents that we have. The enforcement, the noise issues, the intensification of use, the parking issues that we have in conjunction with this, and try to figure out what is it that we're really trying to address, what's the problem that we're trying to solve, and how can we solve that in the best way. And I guess that's sort of where I'm going with it.
Councilmember Brzezinski.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with the Vice Mayor, and I think that one of the issues for us really is to differentiate those things that are going to allow us to better understand our own alcohol policy, where it has been proven to be unclear in the past and then causing consternation for the Planning Commission, where they're trying to make sense out of an actual application in front of them in relationship to the language. I think the problem that I had in the very beginning of this exercise was that one sentence in the policy that talked about we try to discourage entertainment with alcohol, but if you want a permit, then you have to have a policy, which basically eliminated the possibility of having entertainment. And to me, the idea of a nightclub is not what I'm looking for. The idea of a venue wherein you can have some type of music, like the jazz combo that you're talking about. That makes a lot of sense, and I think it's a very contemporary focus for us. If we get past the point of, then how do we regulate every single thing? And so there are no escapes in this. So I think it is important for us to consider the possibility of pulling the language that's being proposed to us in the alcohol component to clarify where we've seen lack of clarity in the past, but to spend a little bit more time talking about how are we going to create the kind of environment that we want when it comes to entertainment. And to me, I'm not looking for an entertainment zone. I think that would be absolutely counterintuitive to what we're trying to do as a community. I think we've had a couple of examples of establishments that came into being, had all the promises in the world of being good neighbors, and it didn't work out that way. And we're suffering through that right now. So I think that that's what we're attempting to protect against. But at the same time, I would like to see us get past that language that says that you can't approve entertainment unless you have the policy. So we can go to focus on that piece of language rather than to create a very significant bureaucratic conflict that we'll have to deal with in the future. That would be my recommendation.
Other discussion, further discussion? Motions? What's the mayor's point of view? I've heard a lot of different ideas this evening that I agree with, and this is obviously quite difficult to move forward. I think of our community in terms of changing times, our policies, 1994, 2001, and then I think of the new concept comes along of a wine bar. Things like wine tasting that are not new concepts but new to our community. I think of the owner of Carrie Nations and the idea of the jazz trio, and I was actually in there one night and I saw the jazz trio, and I thought it was a very nice addition to the ambiance. But then you have to, of course, balance the needs of the residents. So I realize that it's challenging to think of businesses going forward and try to be progressive and try to create opportunities for businesses in the future, but I also am concerned about the residents and the enforcement issues that were discussed as well. So I'm still sorting this out in my mind, what direction I would go in. And those are my comments for now. Vice Mayor.
Also, I'm going to try a motion and forestall the line-by-line editing. And my motion would be to send this item to an ad hoc committee appointed by the mayor with a view toward looking at our existing alcohol policy, which is Exhibit A of Attachment 17 of our desk item, and consider specifically removing the requirement for a separate entertainment process, consider adding or modifying definitions so they make sense as people dine today, consider whether consider separate bars that, well, actually I should say just consider what it means for an intensification of use when these establishments are actually used versus 5 peak hour trips, and how those consequences should be addressed, and if that needs to be done separately, fine, but I don't see why it couldn't be part of this because it's affected by entertainment. Consider developing how best to develop a responsive complaint process. Consider time limits on the response that complainants get from our staff or our police department. Consider the noise devices that Councilwoman Spector indicated were available so that we can use an existing ordinance to address chief complaint, which is noise. And consider how we might want to tweak Section 5 of our existing policy, which has to do with enforcement and how many strikes would you get, what would be the nature of the strikes, whether fines are appropriate, and when would you get to the point that you would actually consider revoking a permit, consider the modification of a CUP versus a separate application. And I know I've listed a lot, but I'm trying to go slow. And those things I would hope could be incorporated into our existing policy, which is three pages long. And it's a very good, to me, it's a great skeleton for us to go forward. It contains the very items that we always receive complaints about. And I think, again, the key is complaint process, response, and enforcement. And I think with that, we could probably have a good, viable downtown. So my motion is to return it to an ad hoc committee to consider those items in the context of our existing policy.
So we have a motion on the table. Do we have a second or more discussion about the motion?
I'll second the motion for more discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Brzezinski. We have a motion and a second. Councilmember Spector.
Thank you. I'm going to support the motion because it contains a component relating to responding to complaints, which is my threshold issue, and it has a component relating to noise levels. And as I said, I think those two items undermine or underlie every single thing that we have thought about here and that people and businesses have discussed with us.
Councilmember Brzezinski.
And I seconded the motion because I think that we have been able to glean from our Planning Commission a very thoroughgoing orientation to those issues that are before us. And one of the things that struck me in reading the Planning Commission is that the more they dialogued about this, the more it became very clear that we were heading towards such a complex outcome that it would be, whether it's enforceable or not, it would at least be confusing. And confusing not only for for the staff that was going to have to enforce it, but also for anyone who is in our business community who wanted to try to somehow live by it. And I think I'm looking for a simpler outcome that serves both those purposes: enforceability, because it's understandable, and it's also able to be appreciated and bought into by the members of our community who are going to be the applicants here. As far as the ad hoc committee has served us well in the past for very complex issues, and I think that this will be a good opportunity for us to take care of every one of these issues that are in front of us. I do believe the idea of separation of the conditional use permit from the entertainment permit is a very important thing for us to consider, however, because I am concerned about the entertainment component running with the land. I think that's a much different thing than the restaurant use. But that differentiation will be part of the discussion, as the Vice Mayor indicated in her laundry list of things to look at. So that would be what I would really recommend strongly that we do in relationship to this analysis from this point.
Further discussion? Councilmember Spector?
Thank you. Once again, following up on Mr. Przinski, I want to commend the Planning Commission. They were given a ton of material, and they went through it in a very diligent fashion. I concur that they had a lot of challenges with some of the issues. They themselves raised issues that were not included in the documentation that they were given. So I appreciate their work. Because I'm supporting this motion that sending all this going back to an ad hoc committee does not mean that I don't appreciate what the Planning Commission did. It means that I learned from what they provided us, and it is from what they gave us that I took the 30 issues and brought them into 2. So thank you.
Vice Mayor.
My comments are virtually identical, but I also wanted to commend the staff for all the hard work that you put into this policy, those members of the business and community that I see in the audience who have put a lot of time and effort into what we got, the Planning Commission, and my fellow council people. We could not have got to the decision of how we should approach this if we didn't have all that input, and if we didn't have all these documents and the proposals in front of us, we wouldn't have the ability to try to get to a good resolution and actually be able to identify the core issues that we should be addressing. So thank you to the community, thank you to staff, and thank you to Planning Commission.
Further comments, further discussion? I will echo the comments made by the others on the dais here this evening. Thank you for all the hard work by everybody. This is an interesting outcome this evening. I would not have predicted this walking into the chamber, not that we try to make predictions, but it is an essential outcome. And looking at, I hope with the ad hoc's work moving forward, we'll come up with a better result for everyone than just going by this line by line and trying to make an edit here this evening on the dais. So I will be supporting the motion. So I'll call the question. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Passes unanimously. And this concludes our meeting. Thank you for coming.